February is Black History Month, which began as Negro History Week in 1926 in celebration of African American achievements, founded by Carter G. Woodson. His goal was to ensure that the accomplishments of African Americans were celebrated and eventually worked into school curriculums as part of general American history taught every day.
I don't learn enough about my history. Every year I feel like I'm learning the same thing, going over the same topic as if history consists of only slavery and the civil rights movement. What about the time in between those two eras? What about the time way before those eras? Even when we touch on these topics as simplified, we don't get to hear about the accomplishments, pain, and struggles that the people before me went through. Instead, I continue to learn about. Their accomplishments were great, and I respect the impact that they've made in shaping society into what it is today. Yet, there are so many figures that are getting erased from history. It isn't fair that we have to learn about the same topics while missing out on learning about an entire group of people's history. I interviewed several classmates and educators to get their opinions on the matter. This month, I observed how my school would bring attention to Black History Month.
What is the importance of Black History Month to you?
I think Black History Month is really important because it gives us a chance to examine a part of American history that we don't often look at. I don't have any personal ties to it, but I do think that it's extremely necessary.
To showcase the Black excellence of America that has been oppressed in the past few centuries.
I think it's very important for Black History Month to sort of take time out of the usual, learn about European history and American history all the time to, focus in on what's important and what's made the Black community such a unified and strong thing.
To me, I think Black History Month is important because it gives us an opportunity to shine the light on figures in American history and world history that usually don't get a lot of attention. A lot of times we think about history as something that's integrated, where, it's all American history and everyone is taking part in it. And while that's true that so many people have taken part in it, not everyone's voices get heard, not everyone's stories get told.
I took note of what activities my school would do to recognize Black History Month. During the morning announcements, they would state some Black history facts, and at the end of the month, there was a program that the Black History Club and Fine Arts departments performed for the student population.
That means that in your heart, somehow in the depth of your spirit, you must know that you are Black but beautiful. Rain on me, rain on me.
Most Americans earn at least a high school education. The 12 years spent in school happens at an early impressionable stage of their lives. According to an article by Audrey Kim from Fordham Institute, children of color will make up 52% of K-12 students by 2021. She adds, "As many have said before me, education plays a major role in framing American culture and identity. Through our schools, we reflect on which ideas, phrases, and principles are woven into the fabric of the nation," argues my colleague Robert Pandisco. An American education should teach us what it means to be American, but for too many minority students, our education system has left them feeling like outsiders.
I don't think the amount of Black history that we learn is sufficient, or really just any other history besides, American and European history.
I don't think we're learning enough because they don't teach it enough in school. They barely teach Black history in school. Literally, when Black history rolls in the year, you barely talk about it. You barely hear about it on the news. You barely hear about it from students in school. So I feel like they don't talk about it as much as they should.
Most of the knowledge that not going to say there's none in history books, but it is nowhere near enough because most of the stuff that I've learned myself is from what I've done my research on, or my parents, my grandparents, and what they say, telling their stories and their knowledge and their expertise. So
When it comes to U.S. history, when you look at the history of the United States, a lot of the things that we come to appreciate, like our monuments and stuff, were actually built by African Americans. And I think that we spend too much time on things that are unimportant when we should be examining the American culture, which involves more than just a few select people.
I think it really depends on the individual teacher. So me, myself, I have a passion for it and a dedication to it, and I do what I can to try to integrate those things into my classes and into my lessons kind of throughout the year. So if we're speaking on something in February, of course it's Black History Month, and you're going to see, different cultural aspects and historical things being taught during that month. But throughout the whole year, October, if we're talking about, the revolution itself, we're talking about the Civil War or the time periods in between those big events, there are always opportunities to highlight the contributions of African Americans and other people of color in our curriculum. That's me. I can't say that I speak for every single other teacher, though. So I think it is necessary to make sure that the culture and the history and the accomplishments of African Americans are kind of embedded in our curriculum. And then that way we don't have to worry about whether or not a teacher teaches those things in those classes or in their classes. Those things are kind of second nature and they become part of our overall curriculum.
In the state of Georgia, if you were to look at the demographics, you will find that the Georgia Department of Education tells us that just over 36% of students, of public school students in Georgia are African American. Yet by and large, many of them go most of the school year without learning anything about their history or their culture, their views, their values, their standpoints or perspectives. And largely what is learned is from a European or Eurocentric perspective. And what happens over the course of time is unconsciously all students, not just African American students, but all students begin to think or see Europeans as models of intellectual authority, as models who are superior at everything that they've done, not realizing that, again, that African people have contributed all of these amazing things that literally make our way of life today possible, and so much more. But somehow that doesn't make it into the textbooks.
I decided to dig a little deeper and look at the Georgia Department of Education's social studies curriculum. As I scrolled through the standards for each grade level, I noticed the repetition of some topics and the lack of others. It became more apparent to me that, like African American history, other minorities were left out of the picture as well. The most culturally diverse curriculums were for 6th, 7th, and 10th grade, which focuses on world history rather than U.S. history. But minorities were part of U.S. history as well. Why isn't that represented?
It's completely disproportional, especially when you look at AP World History, which is overwhelmingly dealing with either Arabian or European history with some Mongol history mixed in. But I feel like Africa kind of gets the cold shoulder in that class, even though it's supposed to be a college-level world history class.
It makes me feel overwhelmed because I feel like we should learn more about it. How are we going to know what happened in the past if we don't talk about it in the present?
The American Civil Rights Movement, they sort of cover all the bases and they lightly touch on all the injustices. They don't really, they talk about, racism and sometimes vandalism stuff, but they don't go into depth about how hangings were seen as like community gatherings for people. Like people would bring their, children and gather around, trees to watch, African Americans hang from trees. And, they don't touch on the sexual assault that a lot of, black females had to go through working in their lower class position, and it's never really taught about. It's mostly just, there were some riots and there were some like hangings, and then they just sort of move on past it.
Now America's a very diverse place. It was a diverse place when the Europeans came and took it to begin with. So it's like this is strictly on the European, like their standpoint of like the history books is from their perspective and not getting the other perspectives. I'm not gonna say it's just the African American, but there are also other cultures and the other people that are being oppressed.
I don't think students are learning enough about their heritage or have enough of an opportunity to express their heritage. There's so many different things that, as I said, should be added and infused into the curriculum so that we can see it from a broader perspective. America is a multicultural nation, and so the curriculum should reflect that.
As I've interviewed everyone, I realized that there was one thing we all agreed on. Black history isn't taught enough in schools. 28 out of 365 days is not enough to acknowledge and celebrate our heritage. I'm thankful that we have the month, but I realize that it's become a scapegoat for the education system to cram all of our history inside of it. Black people have accomplished, created, and contributed so much to our society, and most of it has been left out of the curriculum or forgotten. Students will show more interest and thrive when learning about topics that reflect themselves, yet that isn't the case for most minorities. This has been going on for generations, and there has been little progress or improvement. The education system is failing us, and I think we've been complacent for too long. Future generations deserve to know about our history. All of it.